Radiata Stories is one of those RPGs people will talk about, but not a whole lot of people get around to playing, which basically makes me a real-life archaeologist entitled to government grant money. It's a pretty game. Stylized well, it's quirky.
I am not comfortable with how this painting is looking at me.
But it doesn't do itself any favors for player retention. It's got a slow, meandering intro, piles of cutscenes. The actual gameplay is limited. The story goes surprisingly far for something so cute, but it doesn't nail every message it wants to send, sometimes kneecapping its own narrative weight with tone-obliterating comedy. And it's one of the most impactful games I played last year. The first thing we're shown is a prophecy. You ever hear the one about the tower that scraped the rim of heaven? I wonder what this game's about! There's even an opulent intro cutscene styled like an old tome. Man, I love details like that. They didn't have to show off a dragon slayer doing an anime against a big goofy dragon, but you know what they did? Put a little respect on that name. The premise is simple. You like friends? Damn, man, I don't know about that. It's the big thing people bring up when they're introducing the game because, 170 recruitable party members is a little outlandish in video games, and such a big deal, it's on the back of the box. Convince over 175 brave souls to risk life and limb for your cause. What cause? This kid looks like he just polished off a cinnamon roll. In fact, you'll be asking, what cause, for most of the game. It's a fascinating experience played to completion because you'll be strapped in for hours as the game slowly unfolds, calmly, casually, only to totally upend in the latter half. But the story isn't trying to waste your time. It's trying to establish some things, create context. It's the kind of game that demands your attention. Radiata Stories is a 2005 Tri-Ace RPG published by Square Enix and directed by Naoki Akiyama, a factoid that is, for once, almost meaningless. Prior to Radiata Stories, this individual directed Charinko Hero, a Japan-only GameCube kart racer. Doesn't speak well to design lineages. It wasn't his first rodeo, of course. Dude's career goes back to PC-88 development with Lord of Wars and Digimon World on the PlayStation, Star Ocean Blue Sphere on the Game Boy Color. But I think it's more useful to look at Radiata Stories as a total Tri-Ace effort. The studio's historically been viewed from that lens. After all, around Radiata's time, the most recognizable staff name would have been Motoi Sakuraba, who is a freelance musician, not a company guy, and he didn't contribute to Radiata Stories at all. Tri-Ace was formed from the remnants of Namco's Wolf team, people who worked and ultimately abandoned development for Tales of Phantasia due to a publisher drama, and they went on to make striking, interesting RPGs that sold far better than expected, especially for the era. Their games tend to be world or galaxy-scouring adventures with plenty of party members. Those strands of design bleed into Radiata Stories. There's a focus on the inherent worth and uniqueness of any given person, choosing to dignify even throwaway characters by allowing them into your party. Where Valkyrie Profile's protagonist could only recruit the recently dead in preparation for the end of the world, in Radiata Stories, you can recruit almost anyone, as long as you meet the requirements. That means Farmer Jeb. That means your best friend's mom. This is Radiata Stories' greatest stumbling block for new players. You'll hear the 170+ characters talk and want the whole damn world, but you're nothing. Nobody. And you're gonna have to wait a good long time before things open up. You play as Jack Russell, a 5'5" beta male with no money and no bitches. I was gonna joke about the name, cause it's a dog, but I think it's funnier that some game reviewer probably devolved into performative hysterics over a name that basically means a silly little guy. It's induction day for Radiata Knight hopefuls. Jack's dad was a famous member of the Order who vanished years ago, and so he's resolved to become a great knight himself, and use connections and power to find his father. That reminds me of when I tried to be a teacher. Man, my mom was a teacher, and I like school. I think my dad factors into that somehow, but it's fuzzy. Jack's made to fight someone named Ridley.
What? No way! Ridley's a girl? Sheesh. I was looking forward to a real fight.
Yeah, I wasn't kidding about that beta shit. You catch the latest Andrew Tate, bro?
All right!
I love this. Jack is portrayed as enthusiastic, always down for anything, but comedically underprepared, powerfully arrogant all of the time. And it's the exact energy you want for this kind of game. You're gonna go places, meet people, be a learner, be a failure, think girls are weaker than you and get laid out because, hey man, she's been training since she was a kid. You really thought you dumbass? You really thought! You even get inducted into the Knights anyway, because your dad was a legendary knight, and the commander recognized the name. Oh, that's my favorite main character, the one who fails up. It stings. Now you're just a nepo baby. You're only progressing because the game allows it. You're instantly taught that you're not where you need to be, you're not worth a lot on your own, and you shouldn't assume any given person is any particular thing. They might kick your ass. They did! Well, with your newfound knighthood, you're free to bully some people, even if you can't recruit characters yet. There's a kick button, which is how you interact with the environment. You kick everything you can for consumable items, and even a sword upgrade tucked away in a castle storeroom. And everything, by the way, includes people. This guy spits out 1 coin per. You know what? You can keep it. It's actually kind of funny, like how socially immature people might post overfamiliar, playful attacks towards people they want to befriend, unaware they're just pushing those people away. Maybe this game is actually genius. You form a little trio in the early game. Jack, Ridley, the girl who beat you, and Captain Gans, all members of the newly formed Rose Cochon Brigade.
What does it mean? Well, how shall I put it? Well, Rose is like pride, and the Cochon is the loyalty to country bit.
Really?
No. But I really like to believe that that's the case.
It's not that your squad being called the Pink Pig Brigade is funny. It's because they didn't explain it to monolingual Anglophones. It's a fun dynamic. Gans loves performing duty, Jack likes doing things, and then there's Ridley. Orb creature! Game devs, please. Always have a weird character with gigantic eyeballs lurking in the back of any shot like a specter. Ridley is constantly annoyed by Jack and wants to get every job done quickly, efficiently, and professionally. She's openly contemptuous because Jack got handed the position for free while she had to work for it and escape overprotective parentage to earn it.
Only those related by blood may bear the august Silver Lake name.
Oh, well, I guess we know which donkey is pulling the cart in that family.
Well said, young Jack. You have a sharp eye. You don't miss a lot, do you?
Aw, you're just saying that.
No, Jack. Don't be so self-effacing. A good knight must have wisdom as well as strength. Are you saying I'm an ass?
It's been 5 minutes, and I love this game. Lighthearted tension, fun adventures, let's go! Let's game it! The intro lazily rolls through a few short missions, travel to the city of dwarves and escort some cargo back to base. Bring some dweeb to the city of flowers hidden deep in the land of the elves.
Hello, Master Genius.
Bro's name is Genius? Hey, real quick, what's 368 divided by 287? 1.28222. You're an idiot. Idiot. These missions aren't hard. You run all over the gorgeous game world, kill ants, giant sloths. What are these enemies, dude? And not a whole lot else. There's a few side quests, little things like that, but for the most part, you can truly roleplay Jack, not really caring, not really engaging, and throwing yourself at whatever you're supposed to do next. At the very least, it's good for getting a handle on basic mechanics, updating equipment, and playing around with your moveset. The early squad's not quite a trio. Gans hires out this priest named Clive, but I completely forgot he existed, which basically sums up his entire deal.
I can't do nothing yet. Nice to meet you.
You can't do nothing? Nothing at all?
Nope, not a thing. I can eat and sleep is all.
I moved towns heading into grade 5, and for the first time in my life, I kept hearing kids say, "I seen that." This game sees me, man. Or should I say scenes me? It's a pretty simple and fairly boring series of missions, but you can see how people fall off before it gets hot. Long-winded cutscenes, repetitive low-stakes battles. Still, it does a good job at communicating some things. The world outside of Radiata Castle is inhabited by humans, but it's all small towns, little pockets of civilization, tight-knit communities clinging together. And your little band is cutting into a very inhabited world. It's teeming with monsters and fairy creatures, the combined term for dwarves, elves, goblins, etc. They're all limited to different spots on the map, but everyone is cloistered away in their own territory, hostile or, at best, passive-aggressive. There's a history there that's left unexplained. Jack's so young and so disinterested in history and politics, he's just a sheltered farm kid, he can't fill in the gaps. And it's fun to pay attention because Jack doesn't. The leader of the dwarves wants to raise prices on goods traded with humans, and yet the guy's house is littered with gold. He's personally drowning in riches. The whole thing is framed as fairly weird and fairly dire, but there's our pro tag, not contributing in the slightest. When you approach the fairy city, 2 guards immediately threaten to kill you. Jack kind of waves this stuff off, doesn't really get what's going on, but it's obvious that the history between humans and the other races is checkered and bloody. You pass an old fort that Gans and Ridley say was critical in a historical battle against the elves. And in a sense, this is frustrating. It's hard to imagine that Jack is so ignorant of the world around him that he truly knows nothing. Ridley knows things, and Jack is the son of a famous Radiata knight, after all, someone whose name carries weight. Did his sister not bother explaining his father and what he was famous for? Or is he truly that mediocre? I guess so. But he's also a kid, so we'll hand-wave it. Jack makes for a good player point of view. We get to learn as we go with no real protag knowledge misalignment, no friction. The trio isn't much of a team early on, like you'd expect, and the first escort goes sour when goblins take the dwarf supplier hostage.
Doodly-doo-doo.
Do they make bleach for your ears? Gans isn't sure how to respond. Jack's stunned, and Ridley suggests action. Can you imagine the sheer volume of absurd crime-mad apoplexy you'd find online if this game came out today? Look out, guys! The orb creature's more competent than the captain! This represents a dangerous trend of glorifying women. Thankfully, the goblins are dumb as shit.
We play game for goat. Categories. Next word starts with last letter of word before. Us first. Birds. Bluebird. Dove. Egg?
The intro segment ends about 3 hours into the run. You're out playing messenger to the elves, or more specifically, you're trying to open a communication line up between humans and light elves by enlisting the help of the dark elves, which will matter later. Suddenly orcs attack, and Ridley is nearly killed in combat alongside another elf. The leader of these elves, Lord Naguera, is able to save Ridley, but it requires a transpiritation ritual, something that none of the humans have any knowledge about, something that's never been performed on a human. The ritual is a success and Ridley stabilizes. Her father is furious that we allowed this to happen, even though I totally schmooved on those dweebs, not gonna lie. It's a low blow, Chief, and the Rose Cochon Brigade is disbanded thanks to Buddy's meddling. Jack and Gans are turfed and left to the cold, cold streets.
I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known.
While Ridley gets a promotion she knows she doesn't deserve. Suddenly she's Jack, the nepo baby, and everything is false. All told, Radiata Stories is a lighthearted experience that dedicates plenty of cutscene time to humor, and so when something as small as being fired happens, it's crushing. Jack's a nice enough guy who wanted to find his father and follow in his footsteps. Gans was also living up to his own knightly lineage and did everything right, or close enough. One bad thing happened in a military job and 2 dreams are dead. It sucks. And maybe this sounds a little silly to overemphasize, but it probably hits you a little more if you've ever been through something similar. I know I have, but that's a story for another time. What the fuck? The game starts properly after Jack is accepted into the mercenary guild, Theater Vancourt. Gans fails the test and ends up in a drunken stupor for a while, but he'll be back, so dingy apartment, a crapbag squad you can barely rely on, and nothing but time. You're allowed to enter Radiata Stories on your own terms. Or at least you can tell yourself that. Radiata Stories is completely unhinged, and it's not any one thing. It's the whole thing is deranged. Top to bottom. Bizarro game. You'll recall I mentioned friends. Theater Vancourt features the Friend book, the book that contains all your friends. Let them out. It's fully blank and we have no one to quest with. Well, that sucks. Hey, Thanos, wanna be my friend? Well, Well, you're not wrong, but come on, man. Look at Jack's face. What a nice young man. You're an asshole. And your head is huge. You're not really tutorialized in any meaningful way about friendship. How do you get party members? How do you get friends? The answer is, it depends. Radiata Stories has a lot going on. A good chunk of the game happens in the city, which features all kinds of independent NPCs all keeping their own schedules. They'll tromp all over the place, and you've only got a crappy 4-point clock to go by, and yes, their schedules are minute-specific. So if you want to know about any given NPC, you might have to follow them. So buckle up, because we're gonna get a friend or a restraining order. Stalking is actually the #1 way to learn anything about anybody in this game. That's a bad message to send, but of course it doesn't expect you to wait around for 15 real-life minutes until whoever gets tired of standing somewhere and goes somewhere else. I did, but it's also my job. No, instead, Radiata wants you to stumble across people whenever you happen to. It wants to create the illusion of a bustling city, and succeeds. I go looking for a priest in their own labeled room, only to find them halfway across the city. It's incredibly hard to pin some of them down, and anytime you really want to find someone, you really aren't going to. Amazing for simulating life, but I really want the green guy? And you want to know where someone generally is if you're gonna recruit them. The game is a day-night cycle, and most characters go to bed at normal hours, and you can't enter most individual homes, so it's gotta be in the day. Problem is, it's entirely impossible to know exactly who's recruitable and when without a guide. This guy in the bathroom? No problem. If you kick him, he'll join. This little fella tells you to get better clothes and that you're poor. Well, what the Jack is a nobody in this society. If he were a knight, things might be different, but as far as career progress goes, Jack's bottom of the barrel. People don't care how nice you are or whatever. They want specific things. Help with a problem, showing up in their life a lot, just having status. And right now, you've got some work to do. I like how honest the system is. Of course, people don't care about you unless you have status, something they want, or maybe lastly, when it comes to strangers, you connect with them personally. Tri-Ace doesn't exactly get a ton of credit for their games the way Final Fantasy is praised in perpetuity, but they consistently demonstrate an understanding of people, and I think that's the fastest path to making endearing work. Oh yeah, another strategy is kicking. Yeah, you could get away with that shit at the castle, but here in the streets, you better be ready to throw hands. You can pick a fight with just about every character in the game. These fights don't kill anyone. You won't lose a possible friend for kicking their ass, but you might get your shit pushed in. You already made this mistake with Ridley, Jack. Don't be beating on anyone like it's a free win. Of course, you can find someone to heal you in town, and really, you have everything to gain. Some characters can only be recruited by beating them in a duel. It's like anything. Call someone a loser on the street, you might get beat up. You might hurt someone's feelings. You might make them come. You know what? So, finally, after failing to recruit almost anyone of note, I ran into this kid who joined up freely, because he sucks hella and wants a friend. And I found this other guy also stalking someone. Well, they say your people will see you. Hey, wait, what? What? Radiata Stories will occasionally rip you away from whatever you're doing, during free time periods that is, to start a main story mission, usually after a few days or sleeping in your bed. Yeah, you can be in the middle of doing anything and be teleported into the plot. It's nuts, and it's really annoying too. I was in the middle of something, game. I think that girl might have said yes if I asked her 10 more times. Without knowing how progression works, you can be chasing a potential friend and running errands stuck in the middle of some optional side quest and get yanked out of your own time to do your job. I don't think it's evil or bad game design necessarily. The game's centered on immersing yourself in the world, and that includes Jack having a job and struggling up the ranks in Theater Vancour, building his legend, as it were. You know, that and paying rent. Damn. You just know bro is downing whole cans of pinto beans. Anyhow, a little communication would go a long way. That's all. The actual problem is completionism. Radiata Stories is profoundly difficult to properly complete, and I'm not that kind of player anyway, but you'll find it's incredibly easy to miss out on certain side missions handed to the player by Thanos. God, that name! And all because of how the game progresses during free play. Entered your house at the wrong time, lingered around too long trying to make friends. Now we're moving on, kiddo. Tough luck. Jeez. The story missions you're dragged into tend to be plot irrelevant early on. A long trip to a swamp for crocagator skin. Oh, I love that. It goes beyond the, giant beast concept, and now the crocagator is a manifestation of people's fear of not knowing what the difference is between an alligator and a crocodile. Or it's just a big lizard. In another quest, you can take a long trip to the Barrens for Smilodon fangs. You clear a giant snake out of a work site. You deliver materials. You're put to work handling small, but sometimes extremely dangerous jobs. Missions that can be incredibly challenging if your party sucks. And that's not a mistake. Radiata loves letting the player simmer in the world, and now that you're a workie, it's hard-ass labor for questionable pay. Hardly any time for friends, and they're all too busy with their own shit to be helpful to you. Or at least that's how I'm interpreting the ludic experience. Way to sum up most of my working life, game, thanks. But everyone's fumbling around in this shit with you. Your new captain's an alcoholic. The private's an unremarkable schlub. Everyone's stuck in their small-lived lives, and suddenly it's obvious why it's so hard to make friends. How the hell are people supposed to care about you if they don't know you? How are they supposed to care when they've got so much else going on? Most importantly, how is anyone supposed to extend an olive branch to you specifically when everyone's life is more or less dictated by those who can amass wealth, people who pay for your labor because they can? You're only sent to collect Smilodon fangs so the paunchy priest can grind them into medicine, which sells for an incredible sum compared to what you're paid. I love an explicit critique of capitalism. I appreciate an illustration so plain a child can understand it. The orc peon says work is da poop, no more. I say, put that guy's head on a stick while we're letting this experience wash over us. Let's talk systemic cruft. I mentioned that Radiata doesn't do a good job of selling itself, and the combat makes it plain. You could run the thing from start to finish thinking the gameplay is overly simplistic and flat. And that's true, but it's not the whole story. Combat is not hard. You move, you tap to attack, and you can guard. Double tap guard to do an invincible backdash. Very important, if you've played Street Fighter, you know. Every successful hit, every hit you take, builds up the Volti gauge. Really, guys? Volti gauge? It's a typical resource build and dump system. You usually spend Volti points on big special attacks, like this Claymore move that'll obliterate most of the game, or on special team moves you can learn by reading books. You can equip 4 different kinds of weapons as well, and they do alter combat significantly enough, but Radiata Stories is a party game, so no individual thing really matters over much. You can handle most duels without any particular strategy. You can use any weapon and get carried by your team. You can change your moveset in a menu and think you're super clever, using the fastest single claymore hit to stunlock weak enemies. But the second that you fight stronger guys, you'll realize you can't stunlock anything if the game doesn't want you to, and be reduced to playing as part of a team regardless. The game has an order system, but you never need to use it at all. Gans teaches you very early in the game. You can direct a character to do some specific action. It's just, Radiata Stories is not that tactical of a gameplay framework. You overpower things easily when you're the level you should be for any fight. Why would you need someone to play dead when you can just not order that and slap them to death instead? The willingness to receive orders is built into every character also. Interesting quirk. Some warriors won't play dead, for example. You just can't tell them to. It's supposed to be like, individuality is a liability sometimes, except here it's just an unalloyed good. Button mashing is bad. Even says so in the official guide. Jack does anything you press, it'll queue up your actions in perpetuity, so sure, lay off the buttons. But you can also lay back and let auto-targeting drag him along for free, so maybe button mashing is based, actually. It's very much like Legend of Mana in that way. None of the cool little extra stuff you tack on really matters, and it's mostly for personal flavor. But we can appreciate that. If it's true that the party makes the player still gets to contribute comfortably as whatever version of Jack they like best. And that's important. We all suck. We could all do better. But you can pick what kind of suck you are. You know, Jack can't cast spells, and I would not be shocked if there was a version of this game where Jack had class options. Everything's set up for it. The friend system allowing every kind of person be recruitable. Jack having this customizable moveset. Maybe you were intended to rise up the ranks in one of the 4 guilds, though the final product is a generalist experience. You can use plenty of items too, like you'd expect. healing, status cleansing, but these get expensive to keep stocked, and it's worthwhile to find a quality healer. Items are useful though, especially in dueling situations. If you find yourself unable to beat someone, it's usually because they're smacking you around with an overpowered Volti attack.
I don't even have that much HP!
And yeah, you can buff your defense or increase your max health or whatever, but you can just as easily turn them off completely because for some reason, an enemy charging a Volti attack is treated as a status that can be overwritten by applying something like poison, an affliction most characters can't cure, which you can inflict with a certain projectile. So now you can beat the strongest guys in the game, and all you gotta do is apply once and run. I'm a warrior. I'm a full warrior. You can also ignore the Volti gauge for plenty of battles because your strength is effectively the strength of your team until you get your own ultra mega attacks, but ignore that. The first time I ran Radiata Stories, I kept the starter healer, Clive, and eventually hit a wall when I realized I couldn't out-heal a particular boss's damage or out-damage that boss's regeneration. This may be an action RPG, but it is not an action game. You are not going to cheese it, you are not going to be more clever than it. The systems are everything. Hit a wall, your friends suck. They just suck. Get better ones. Look, I get it. I like Randy too, but his taste in anime is garbo. And frankly, it's impacting his combat performance. Get him out of here! So Radiata Stories' early game is defined by friction. You can miss out on things, you can get in over your head. Your weapon is inconsistently useful, you are not a hero. You can screw up if you don't try hard enough or don't make friends with a quality healer. The game is constructed like this for the same narrative purpose as any RPG about a young kid growing up, but it lands so strongly in context because the game is so incredibly thorough about onboarding the player, putting them in Jack's shoes, feeling crummy about losing out on knighthood, being forced to scrounge to survive. You need to get stronger, you need to make friends because you can't do it alone. You try, you fail, you hit the game over screen. Make a damn friend. Make two. And if you thought friends were just for carrying your goober ass in combat, oh no, they contribute to the systemic craft. Every recruitable character has an innate skill. Jack starts with Luck Plus. Given the Nepo baby Luck Plus. Jesus. But you can learn the skills of your party members if you battle with them for long enough, specifically by using the formations feature to physically shape your party lineup in combat. Look at these lineups. We got the square dance, we got the firing squad, we got the teleporting line move. Oh yes, this is a very famous tactic. I believe it's how the Battle of Thermopylae was won. Fair warning though, formations change party member behavior, so, big surprise, your healer won't heal when you're in the firing squad formation. I know that's hard to believe. Gaining extra abilities from party members while in formation is all clearly meant to be an abstraction of working alongside friends and learning from them in the process. It's a cool narrative win, and it's pretty easy to blow through a few battles and end up with plenty of extra skills. Between finding and recruiting friends, customizing your abilities, and tinkering with your moveset, it's easy to see how Radiata latches onto a certain kind of player, gets them invested. And it's a shame it takes something like 5 to 8 hours to land the pitch. Just find the character who will teach you to gain more Volti points per hit, find the book that'll let you heal your party by spending Volti points, and that'll carry you to the endgame. You learn a few Volti attacks that can instantly end combat if you're feeling bored. I love Tri-Ace's work. I love how they so palpably care about lionizing unique individuals, right? Propping them up, celebrating their value. And what better way to do that than giving them a big dang anime move? Okay, way too literal. That's Deathball, dude! That's Deathball! Everyone wants an anime move. Y'all better believe I was self-inserting into Riviera the Promised Land, giving myself a monocolor weapon, and pairing that all up with a big-named super attack.
This is the will of the gods. He's a wrestler!
Valkyrie Profile did this much earlier with Lenneth's famous finisher Nibelung Velesti, and every other character got their own attack. Unfortunately, Radiata's scope is incredibly vast, so only a handful of characters actually get Volti attacks, but they're worth a look. It's everything great about the studio rolled into a set of animations. Character, charm, the sensibilities of badassitude, we all have a Volti attack in our hearts. It's just that not everyone can see it. and if they could, they'd be dead.
Yeah, scuttle off, punk ass.
And you want quick ways to end combat, by the way. Enemies litter the map, something very heard of at this time. Dragon Quest already did this, but it's also worth respecting. You're given the chance to evade most, and it's important for travel. A lot of locations are far out of the way, and you need to save all the time you can, or risk death from boredom. Especially in certain missions where the goal is ultimately walking to one point, talking to an NPC, or killing one guy, and returning. Oh, that's criminal. If I were a quest giver, I'd only give out cool quests, okay? Like, you go and get a bean, like coffee, or... RPG enemies are worth paying attention to because they illustrate the world. Goblins, ghouls, whatever the unholy this thing is. Radiata Stories is particularly funny because the enemies are a total hodgepodge of inconsistent design. You will fight big weird fantasy enemies like this upright cactus. You will fight the giant ants and mosquitoes and tarantulas. A lot of giant bugs. Honestly, a concerning number of giant bugs. Actually, that's an arachnid. Genius, I'll kill you and I'll make sure your death is known. Seriously, go through the bestiary and count exactly how many enemies are fantastical and how many are real-life things but supersized. It's wild. Why is this a partially hollowed out sentient tree with a teddy bear inside? What is this trying to communicate? That the world's a little fantastical, but those elements are reserved for special places? Is it de-emphasizing the character of nature to maximize the charisma of the characters you meet, human and fairy? Is it simply saying that this isn't the real world, but the game itself is an allegory for our world? That's more likely to me, but it's plot spoilers, so you don't fight a lot of human enemies either, except these early bandits, whose faces are covered up. Maybe because they didn't want to confuse the player. This is a game where you can recruit anyone you see, even guys without regular faces. Makes sense to make them generic. These are the details that make great video games, that illustrate exactly how much thought goes into the craft. Very few enemies are interesting to fight, though. A lot of them move forward and attack. You can block them or dodge and smack them right back. That's most of the mechanical challenge at play, and regular enemies are almost a total non-concern after a point. Sure, by late game, you have to mind your healing and your squishier character's health, but by the late game, you should be loaded up well enough to steamroll anything you fight. Boss monsters are a different story, though. Almost all of them are sufficiently fantastical or grounded in the game's historical context. They're the legendary battles that secure your legacy and spread your influence, that make Jack somebody. You need a strong healer, or the means to heal routinely to survive most of these fights. The octopus ended my first run because I didn't have good enough friends. I didn't make the effort. This summon demon fight wants you to target everything but the monster to seal him away. They're a little mechanical, but the system isn't incredibly complex, so like with many ARPGs, if you're at the right power level, you'll be ticking the box and moving on. Also, let's talk about the ambush system real quick. You can get ambushed, inflicting instant confusion, makes battle a pain, if the enemy kind of mildly circles around to your side before battle happens, and it sucks. Conversely, you can never ambush anyone, despite this being the game with a kick to interact button. Let me ambush people. Put a real hitbox on his foot, like this. Oh, shit! Radiata Stories is gorgeous. For years, the industry's tried its hand at crafting the ultimate audio-visual experience, the most believable, refined worlds to finally bridge the gap between reality and fiction, because real life is a big shit. But stylized games are eternal. They're the standing stones of the medium, cast as they are and as they are for all time. Unless you upscale those cutscenes to 4K and get blown out by hell sludge. A brief word on emulation. Like Steambot Chronicles, most modern-day players will probably emulate the thing because it's mildly inaccessible. Like, the game is cheap, surprisingly, but you need a working PS2 and a controller, and tolerance for loading screens. Unlike many games, you can upscale the thing pretty well in regular gameplay segments. It's one of the best I've ever seen on that front. The problem is the cutscenes. Radiata Stories' dev team made use of various interesting techniques to emulate film, so the speaker in any given shot tends to be the focus while anyone else is slightly blurred. course, it's not actually a real camera, so this effect is smeared and butchered in most upscaling methods, resulting in this disgusting ghosting issue, and even when you get it looking clean, there's enough of a difference laid side by side. Plenty of lighting details that get smudged, which is why all the Radiata Stories cutscene compilations on YouTube look like Mamma Mia! Or, like this. It's safest to play the thing in software mode. No tricks, no enhancements, but you can also upscale anything outside of the cutscenes and get a pretty decent compromise on quality, because play is incredibly blurry with software rendering. Either way, it looks more modern than expected. Tri-Ace was pretty progressive about including native 16:9 support at a time when widescreen plasma and LCD displays were hitting the market, and it results in this amazingly full-bodied presentation. In true Tri-Ace fashion, we're handed long horizontal screens, and everywhere we wish we could go, but never can. In the background, you'll tread through well-worn roads and picturesque backdrops, painting a picture of a land at peace, somewhere you'd rather be. I've detasseled corn and I've lived where it smells like manure, and yet the very image of a little farming town makes me want to give up the internet for good and vanish into rurality. Until the post-nut clarity hits and I remember I have games to play. Environments are stunning. Little details characterize a decidedly plain world, make magic from the banal. So many soft palettes and so many hues, cultural artifacts and landmarks dot any given map, bestowing a weight and history to every past fancy. It's confident enough in its world to create beauty, but demand variance. Wastelands, barrens, the world isn't all fields and friends. The further away from human civilization you get, the wilder and lonelier environments become. At the furthest reaches, places like the Orklands, the sky itself warns you to back away. Hey, get the f*** out. And when it does get a little out there, especially later in the game, in distant areas and cordoned off zones, you feel the magic of the early hours rush back after the relative doldrums of the mid-game spent in so many caves and plains. It's a privilege to walk through. Or, you know what? Silly guy solidarity. The world of Radiata Stories is effectively stock fantasy, but there's comfort and value in that proposition. It's a cute and strongly stylized setting that invites you to linger, to gaze at the water's surface. Years ago, I covered Bloodborne and missed my chance to write an essay about how the setting itself, the aesthetics, served the gameplay goals of the Souls experience. In Radiata Stories, you're playing a big goof, meandering around a lazy fantasy world. It sells the exact vibe the story wants: dreamlike comfort, lackadaisical malaise. You're drifting from pretty place to pretty place because the game told you to. No need to look for a deeper meaning. No need to find your father or care about anything beyond the next small goal. And really, how could you begin to do that without a squad of powerful friends and a higher level, a better weapon? The same way it asks you to immerse, Radiata Stories asks the player to stagnate, to become comfortable with the version of the world they know, with all of its people, and their little schedules, and your small-time life working to make ends meet at Theatre Vancour. Fattening up the player like a gigantic bubble ready to burst. Inflating the player big and round. Speaking of, the city is effectively the backdrop of half your time played. It's built around Radiata Castle and divided up into districts. Oh, I love districts in fantasy cities. This is the Poverty District. Here you can find poverty. This is the Trade District. It's where people trade. Stop putting people into camps. There are impoverished traders. Have you played Magic the Gathering before? I actually love these. They're all color-coded and correspond to whatever kind of people live there. Everybody clap for the soft caste system! Let's see. Yellow Town of Sun and Glory, because they're mercenary fighters. Okay, cool. The Blue Town of Water and Wisdom. It's where the mages live. Very helpful if there's any type of Dragon Age magic user suspicion. Got them all rounded up for the slaughter already. The White Town of Stars and Faith. I'd make a joke about ethnocentrism, but bro here is purple. And the Black Town of Night and Lust. I think I'm gonna go live in the Town of Night and Lust. Oh my god, it's Poverty Place. It's the Poverty District! There's something a little deranged about this setup. Like, sure, we've got warriors and shopkeeps, academics and shopkeeps, clergy folk and shopkeeps, then thieves, gamblers, entertainers, hookers, and fun people otherwise. And all the fun people live in a dump. Like, you didn't have to say it quite so loud. While it's a little weird to color code the city like I'm 2 and to shove similar people in the same enclaves, it's useful once again for gameplay and narrative. You've got a good estimate of where any particular NPC lives, so you can more easily make friends with guesswork. More importantly, though, it's an acknowledgement that no matter who we are, we slot into the world somewhere. The world isn't fair. Not everyone has the same opportunities. You got kicked out of the Knights for no good reason, and now you're a mercenary through sheer luck. But you might not have been suited to it. You might have scraped up against society's expectations and found yourself in the Thieves Guild, truly made to scratch out a life day over day, moment by moment, like Gans. Despite his training and past position, Theodore Vancourt thinks he lacks combat aptitude, even though we know that's not true. He just fumbled his chance. And he's thrust into a position he's hardly suited to because a spot opened up as he went about his life. He lives here in poverty, and you don't get to see him. It's probably understood that the player would help him if they got the chance, but you're denied that possibility, like so many people in our lives who slip between the cracks. It's worth noting that the city isn't the only place you make friends. I mentioned the little villages outside of town, a hamlet here, a village there, recruiting anyone you meet if you happen to stumble across them when they're actually recruitable. Not that any of these hicks are particularly useful, but Radiata will let you train them up anyway, and that's what I appreciate so much. You can even backtrack to your hometown, though it's a bit out of the way and never a required visit, which is so poignant by itself. You were sent off by your sister to become a knight. You were so cocky, and you can easily not look back after your failure, never run home to tell her you besmirched your father's legacy. You can get wrapped up like anyone else you meet with your new life and its expectations, with living day to day and paying your rent. Radiata Stories is a game where you can drift away from your remaining family, all because the game doesn't direct you towards home. It's also important that Radiata Stories shows how other species live. Dwarves are holed up in their walled city, but they get on like anyone else. Hey man, I'm looking for a little apple juice, or maybe some milk, if you know what I mean. We serve ale. Oh. By get on like anyone else, I mean work, of course. They work in the mine or craft or do manual labor, but they've got their way of doing things. They're square-built structures and electric signs, and despite their looks, they're no different from anyone else. Not really. The Dark Elves are similar, but their enclave is so communal. It's people focused on crafting and playing. It's hard to imagine the fairy races ever had conflict with humans in the past. Of course, you meet dwarves and elves before you get access to the friend list, meaning you were never able to make friends previously. And you're free to return at your leisure, or during quests, to try your hand at recruiting anyone at all, but you'll probably avoid it. For one, these zones are far out of reach, requiring long treks across lands you've already seen, facing the same monsters you've fought upwards of 100 times. And at a time when you're routinely challenged by dangerous quests with highly lethal opponents, you want knights, priests, assassins, not these lumpy alcoholics and basket weavers, so the game passively reinforces a divide between fairy races and humans. You likely won't make friends with them until significantly later in the game, if at all, and the few you can pick up on a whim, without trying very hard, aren't very useful. There's no real pretext to taking the time, unless you just really love making friends in Radiata Stories. We should talk a little bit more about friends. Part of what makes Radiata obnoxious, part of what makes it compelling, is doing the necessary tap dance for any given character, finding a design you like, a personality you dig, a potentially strong ally, and trying to worm your way into their good graces, which is not something that strictly works. Many recruitable characters are locked behind specific checkpoints, Jack promoted to sergeant, Jack promoted to captain, etc., because like the game tells you, you'll have better luck with more clout. It's why some of the easiest recruits are schlubby dweebs, the new recruit guy, Aiden. I mean, look at this character. This guy is the origin of the term cherry boy. Aiden's one of the few that'll join up with no prerequisites, but there's a trick to that. The game fully expects you to pick him up early, provided you actually find him, but to recruit his father, you need to level Aiden up to 32. That's like playing half, 2/3 of the game with Aiden to unlock his father, who's good, but not particularly impressive. Radiata Stories resists the completionist in many, almost funny ways. This one character is two different people, or two different character models. Anyway, a mage who transforms herself into a bustier, bombshellier person to perform on stage, and the only way to recruit her is to find her when she's transforming in this exact spot and initiate a conversation the second she starts changing. Incredibly frustrating played without save states. By the way, they could have made it anything. Blackmail her while she's performing anything. But no, talk to her while she's off-screen within a half-second window. A+. The commander of Theater Vancour walks off to the sewers to a secret shrine every day, except during certain story segments, and she's tailed by an assassin, Lily, who, if you can beat her while she waits outside the room, will recognize you saved her life and join up. She can also stay strong into the late game, so it's worth the effort. There's a quiet sort of side quest that makes use of various early game quests to unlock a couple of priestesses. This sick kid has no visitors, and his sisters are tied up at the temple every day. If you come by after most early missions, the Crocagator, the Smilodon Fangs, you'll tell him whichever story. Eventually, after enough stories, his two sisters will become recruitable. Now the thing is, and what I love, is that the reward for this side quest is not very good. These two characters, the two sisters, aren't particularly good healers, especially stacked up against others in the same order. So your reward for this easily missed side quest that requires consistent input is not very game-changing at all. Some characters like this Red Knight dude need you to bring special items, a book lost in a mid-game cave that'll pique his interest and have him signing up instantly. If you recruit the Green Knight with a quick duel after a certain in-game promotion and bring them both to their captain Caesar, he'll join up if you're above a certain level threshold because having talked to him, we know he cares deeply about his squad, who you've just recruited, and all the past squad mates he's led and outlived, whose souls he prays for every evening. He's impressed by your show of camaraderie. I went out of my way for Caesar because he's compelling. Plus his sword and armor are really cool. He looks like he deals damage. And true enough, he pulled his way through the endgame. A lot of Radiata forum posting is dedicated to finding the best characters, the team that'll win you the game. But you can quite literally roll up to the final boss with almost whatever as long as you've been training them and know what you're doing. Another mercenary captain, Gerald, requires that you complete a specific quest that's incredibly easily missed because, unlike most of them, it isn't handed out by Thanos. I missed it in my original run, even. After a certain in-game mission where you fight a giant zombie abomination, you're meant to travel to the Void Community, the Thieves Guild, with no indication, by the way. You do this alone to trigger a cutscene that sets off a few more cutscenes and it'll eventually tie to unlocking the chance to duel Gerald for friendship. It's missable because the scene can only happen during one segment of the game, and gets passed over completely if you advance the main plot. And running through, you'll get to see some history between this one upper-level mercenary and another upper-level thief, two old salts with a long-standing grudge. It's played for laughs, they duel and knock each other out, but Radiata is constantly hinting at a broader history that makes you seem so small, so transient, because truly, you are. You have to work for everything. You can take nothing for granted. You're a nobody. I love the little time abyss it creates. So much of the world's lore could be explained away in a second. Your father and past conflicts, for example, if anybody knew you and cared to explain. But they leave Jack alone and let you find out for yourself. It might seem obvious that you're meant to find who you like and recruit only those characters because the game resists any unassisted attempts to catch them all. Get in the friend book or I'll put on the greatest talent show this town's ever seen. But there's context for the impulse. Many players are compulsive and want to see everything, do everything, before putting a game down. The game taunts you with the raw number of recruitables and makes a point of implying it's possible to catch them all. It dangles incredibly powerful people in front of you, dudes who could lay you out in a second, and puts them so far out of reach early on that you'll be frothing to finally recruit someone you don't have to heal or constantly micromanage. People you can rely on who don't only have corn to talk about or obnoxious character flaws you have to suffer through. Look, I'm glad we're treating Johnny Normalman like a dignified human being. I'm just saying if he came with a Kamehameha wave, I'd be a little more excited. The leaders of each guild require every other recruitable guild member recruited to become available themselves. This is a critical impediment to the run. You're led to believe you must become a completionist if you want the full full Radiata experience, at least if you spend any time online reading about the game, reading guides, because they imply these things directly if you want a chance at handling the game's hardest challenges. And it's sad because the game will casually obliterate anyone not paying strict attention to a guide. It is too hard to manage recruiting everyone without one. Following a guide kills so much of the vibe, though. You're not meant to be a people pleaser or a collector. You're not an ass kisser, and this isn't Funko Pops. It's people. You're meant to find yourself in the game with your chosen weapon, with your personally crafted moveset, with the skills you learn from the friends you made, and pursue the relationships you want to. Why else would Radiata Stories leave it up to you whether to return home or not? Why else would Radiata Stories never meaningfully reward the player for bothering to fill out their friend book? And like I said, the game works against you. Thanos, the quest guy, is incredibly easy to miss if you play the game straight because he requires every one of his quests completed. The game usually hands these out in packs of 4 between major story missions, but like I mentioned during free time, you can accidentally advance to the next chapter by sleeping at the wrong time, entering your house at the wrong time, or wasting too much time. But it gets much worse than Thanos. Jarvis, your Theater Vancour captain, must be recruited to unlock the head of Theater Vancour, Elwyn. No problem, right? He's already listed in the friend book. Jarvis is not recruited yet because you have to handle his alcoholism debt that he got from being an alcoholic. These are the recruitment requirements for Jarvis. Don't be less than 5 levels below Jarvis. Make sure you have less than 5,000 gold. Waste as much money as possible until you have less than 5,000 gold. Talk to Gisuke, the bartender at the pub, who'll ask you to collect some tabs for him. Talk to Jasmine in the accessory store, who will give you the money to pay. Talk to Jarvis, who will ask for more time. Agree to give him more time. Here, you must ensure that you do not have more than 5,000 gold and spend it before talking to Gisuke. Talk to Gisuke. He will ask you to pay Jarvis's tab. If you don't have 5,000 gold, you won't be able to pay it right then. Go somewhere and grind up to 5,000 gold and give it to Gisuke. You will recruit Gisuke. Now speak to Jarvis, who will figure out you paid his tab. You'll recruit Jarvis. I got to the end of the game thinking the guide writer here was exaggerating or just being flippant or needlessly restrictive. I did not recruit the head of Theater Vancour that run. And the ultimate Void community member as well, because Jarvis was listed in the friend book, so I assumed I had him already. At this point, I'd already recruited every other available member. Hey Jarvis, I'm considering a career change and I wondered if you could help me out. Right, alcoholic? It's not all bad. Theater Vancour is only hard to complete because of Thanos, Gerald, and Jarvis. The monks of the Elashian Order are way easier and just need a few short side quests, leveling up one character, and playing the game out. Suddenly, you've got uber-powerful monks and healers to face down the final boss. They carried me when I realized I'd lost out on Elwyn, and it's why I want to make it clear that whatever you do, there's an out. I like that you recruit Dwight, the capitalist shitheel, by catching him during confession. I like that you need Miranda to heal you 3 times, but that requires actually being hurt when you find her, which is uncommon in town, so you can pick fights with her and make her heal you until she joins up. The Void community guys and the Varith Magic Institute people are harder to recruit on average. A lot of weird, specific requests and actions, but that also works well enough from a narrative standpoint. You're a meathead idiot, and your people are easy enough to recruit. Priests aren't incredibly complicated in this universe, and some of them are warrior monks. There's crossover there. But you can't cast spells. You're not that smart. The game needs you to read books to unlock Team Volti moves. It's made obvious that Jack hasn't really read anything. You have nothing in common with these people.
Oh, I hate this guy. Everyone says he was a big hero. That's a load of bull. I'm killing him. I'm killing you, dog. Let's go, bro!
You have even less in common with the Void community guys who are thieves and assassins. And performers too, but mostly thugs. You just kill monsters and get paid. You don't harm people. There's a real sense of camaraderie between the members of Theater Van Cour, and at least one half of the priests are united by a common cause and generic principles like faith and honor, which isn't easily found among the various students, researchers, and the staff of the academy, all pursuing their own interests or initiatives. Or among the Void community people who just as likely sell their friends out for coin. It's worth noting that there's even fewer recruitable party members in the Void community at all, presumably because, they don't have much of a strong community and it's represented in-game. It's one of those happy development accidents, maybe time ran out, maybe whatever. One guild ended up smaller, but it works. These smaller, quieter stories are ludicrously loud. That is, you feel them palpably from a play and narrative perspective with every weird stranger you try to recruit. Details are the soul of the game, frankly. How characters have little rivalries and histories, how the Elashian Order has an internal schism between the pious and virtuous monk faction, who care about discipline and good deeds above all else, and the money-hungry venture capitalist faction, all headed by old money aristocrats gentrifying the priesthood and corrupting some of the clergy, but allowed to exist because, I guess Cain, the leader, doesn't mind his own church rotting from within. Is he stupid or utilitarian? We don't know! You get a lot of personal details about characters just by talking to anyone in town, but even the guidebook explains all characters' relationships to each other in these little helpful infographics. And that's what I love about Jack's place in the world. Again, you truly have to work to belong here, and these people have been here quite a long time. They have their schedules, they have their in-groups, their cliques, and you get to discover all of that as a newcomer to the city on your own. As you wander through the world completing quests and leveling up, you'll inevitably stumble across the home of the goblins, those schmucks who tried to rob you in the early game. But they don't attack you, you're actually able to recruit some of them. One goblin makes you answer his questions 3, these completely incomprehensible questions you're likely gonna get wrong and have to retry. The reward is almost entirely worthless. This goblin is not going to carry you through the game. But even this is a story. Trying to wrap your head around some people is almost impossible, seemingly arbitrary, but in their minds, it's sense. Damn. Me when I watch a KBash show vid for real. It's a principle you could extrapolate to all of the goblins or any of the fairy creatures. You don't have all the answers, and you're not the only perspective in this world, and you're going to feel that tension. Also, you can play hide and seek with a little goblin kid named Goo. I love Goo. It's made clear that you can befriend some of the fairy creatures. They're not beyond your grasp or anything, but they are more challenging to recruit. At home, you have the benefit of a shared culture. You can more easily access some of these guild people, and some outwardly respect your rank, your actions. The fairy creatures you meet have no real concern for your human accomplishments, so you have to put in the legwork, get on their level. So I guess, get weaving baskets. I like the friend system for a lot of reasons, but the main thing is the weird, varied requirements that you're probably not going to recruit everybody, that you're going to have to navigate the world on your own terms. These systems aren't just here for fun or to annoy you. They're communicating, telling stories. Like Pietro here, a goblin supremacist who requires you to beat him an unprecedented 3 times to join up. So what they're saying is, if you can't change someone's mind, beat the shit out of them. Radiata Stories has music. What's specifically interesting about this game is shifting away from Trias Perennial Motoi Sakuraba. Now, they got the Growlancer guy, the Grandia guy, and it's a bit of a change. Sakuraba's work features maybe most famously in Golden Sun, but also Trias' classic Valkyrie profile. Both titles are world fantasies, fantastical RPGs that both span the globe, and particularly a world that more or less mimics our own. Golden Sun samples from various real-world mythologies and cultures, just spun into fiction. Valkyrie profile isn't particularly subtle about the alt-Earth thing either. Norse mythology and Japanese Oni in the same game. The tracks in both titles lend a certain weight, a mystical character to the settings. In another timeline, Radiata Stories sounds like this too. But since they couldn't get Sakuraba, despite also being a kind of world fantasy a la Valkyrie Profile and Golden Sun, a simple change in aesthetics, chibi stylings, and consistently lighthearted cutscenes demands simpler scoring. It's a bouncy OST with fairly tropey tracks that shift to match the setting. Brash saxophones for the fighters, slinking woodwinds for the thieves' part of town, some kind of mystical business for the priests. Wait, Town of Scheming? Does Radiata Stories hate God? And it's free enough to pull itself into a suitable state of austerity when the plot needs it, but the experience is constantly communicating joy, music for embracing who you are, reaffirming daily grind tunes. Not to mention, Jack's song is called Honky Tonk Boy. Well, I guess he is a little honky. What's really impressive, and it only came to me hearing the bonus track at the end of the Radiata Stories CDs, is that Tri-Ace very likely wanted to retain the flavor of past games, the world fantasy, in spite of the different composer, and so the soundtrack incorporates piles of different instruments, different genres. It wants to fit the whole world in this one aspect of the experience, even if it's an overly ambitious goal. Speaking of overly ambitious, Radiata Stories is good at seeding its plot, foreshadowing, which I'm told is a literary device. You come across a rabid jail guard early in the game who apparently started attacking his coworker and who's been locked up for everyone's safety.
I hate that snooty little nerd!
Come on, man, there's no reason to be so upset. I'm sure God only hates you a little bit. You meet Dinas, field commander of the Radiata Knights, and he handles the guy by knocking him out, apparently. I guess you just have to hit these people really hard. Later on, during your time in Theater Vancourt, a woman exhibits similar symptoms in the streets. What, did you find out your grandkid got vaccinated? Thankfully, Jack's had extensive de-escalation training from the LAPD. Gaming is the pulp we need and don't even kind of deserve. The gist is, a mysterious illness is making people endanger themselves and others. The cases are isolated, but they're being tracked by the Knights. We don't get any more than that until much later. A lot of the early game is low magic, low interest, pretty banal fantasy setting fluff. So when someone like this walks on screen with smoldering hair and screws around with the player, handing them Canadian currency, we're left as the player to sit in our regular lived life, aware that there's much more going on outside of our bubble. Eventually, you have to deal with a kidnapping. Your squad is paid by the crown to protect the princess for a day on the town. I want to marry the princess. No, I want to marry the princess. Fellas, neither of you are marrying the princess. She's stolen by the Thieves Guild to collect a fat ransom. I'm more surprised you walk away without being executed. I mean, Ridley was harmed, but ultimately lived, and you were fired for that. The princess is legitimately stolen and thrust into danger, and at no point does anyone punish you. And you get a promotion out of the ordeal. I think the scene is supposed to communicate that Jack's finally somewhere he belongs. He pulls together with his slipshod squad, fails the mission, gets bailed out, but moves on to the next day. And I appreciate that very honest undercurrent to Radiata Stories and its plot progression. You know, eventually you will slot into somewhere in your life where you do belong. Like so much of the game, this kind of kiddie, cutesy experience hits so much harder now, having lived long enough to experience these kinds of things. As the plot progresses, as Jack drifts further away from Radiata Castle, he's finally reeled back in by Ridley with an invitation to her birthday party. Oh man, dude, this is your chance. Neg her at the party, bro. Tate said so, bro. Tell her you're seeing someone. Please! You blow in, you meet the jackass to whom Ridley's been promised in marriage, and dip. Maybe Jack doesn't like the vibe. Maybe he just wants to check on her. Either way, the scene pivots to genius. The guy leads Ridley into the City of Flowers off-screen, the home of the Light Elves, to watch the worst play we've ever seen.
Like the Elf King of old, my brother lies dead. But why? That ancient king brought the human female and child to that benighted castle, and there the Dark Elves were born.
It's not that games can't tell good stories. It's that they're so often lost in the development shuffle that they can end up delivered like a 10-year-old hijacked the script. Bro waited until we crept into position to waltz on stage and monologue. This is theater. Like high school theater.
Brother, why in the world did you bring this fate upon yourself?
Was this?
Seriously, $60? I've heard video games most closely align with theater rather than film. But you know, at least Shakespeare didn't have a ratings board threatening him with financial destruction if he dared to make a dick joke. We learned that there was an old elf king who made love to a human woman, crossing the racial divide that everyone tends to respect in universe. This was the birth of the Dark Elves, or at least the Dark Elf bloodline, or the the wood elf guys we met earlier. So the dark elves, who are actually half elves, most closely resemble wood elves. In case you play D&D and got lost, that ancient elf king died of a mysterious illness sometime after, which we've never heard of. In short, humans and elves copulating results in a contravention of the natural order, unbalancing the fundamental rules, breaking the status quo, specifically by bridging racial divides, can create illness. And this illness can kill otherwise immortal elves. Not because elves live forever, but because the illness effectively seals their spirits within cocoons upon death, instead of what normally happens, the spirit of whatever old elf flying off to other living bodies to, quote, mingle with other souls, and carrying on in perpetuity. Man, that would suck. What if your soul got latched to a guy with bad hygiene and you just had to put up with it? And the reason Buddy is monologuing in the woods by himself is that Lord Naguera, the guy we met earlier and this guy's brother, died after saving Ridley because the transpiritation ritual he performed that tethered her soul and that of the other slain elf to her body presumably created another case of mysterious illness, causing him to die off-screen. That's a lot of information to dump on the player, but we can't do a whole lot with it. At the very least, we can now intuit that the mysterious illness is related to elf and human interactions. So far, we've got transpiritation and intercourse on the table, but it doesn't explain the old lady or the jail guard. Do people just catch the disease? Do elf and human reactions differ? We don't know, but we do know that Ridley's gonna factor pretty heavily into the plot. I mean, she's falling apart. Where the Fab Five at, man? Keep it together. The plot heats up after this point. You can handle a lot of side missions, some of which are required for progression and others that aren't. I want to say everything's worthwhile, but sometimes you get handed a quest by a priest to find a stone and kill an octopus and get told it's not the right stone, but that God himself, okay, God himself told the priest to let you keep the stone because it's important. My son, hand that child Chekhov's gun. Of course, these Jack tales do matter in that they exist to strengthen Jack, fill in his hero credentials, and serve as pretext for making new friends, training them up, sharpening your squad, etc. The game's elements are in harmony. We need Jack to finally be someone by the time the plot rolls around. And now that he's been doing great deeds, people try to have him assassinated. Yeah, Buddy learns the cost of fame firsthand. The higher up you go, the more likely someone's waiting with a dagger aimed at your back. While Jack is jacking off, we get a scene where the heads of the Radiata Knights discuss the dwarves' demands from the early game. We like a plot that pays off. You're sort of led to believe the dwarves are all walled off from the world because they like walls or keeping outsiders out. And all the precious gold in. They're cranky, they're weird, they physically gatekeep you early on. Why? Think about it. But we also come to learn that the dwarves are effectively forced to deplete their minds for human interests, and that some deal was struck years ago in the name of peace, demanding a certain quota of dwarven production and a certain set of prices. Geopolitics and empire building are not the purview of most gamers, because you can't play a history book. But in certain story segments, it's stated that the dwarves are effectively enslaved by humans, coerced into a trade deal with decidedly diminishing returns for the sake of peace. So humans don't just waltz in and plumb the mine themselves. So humans don't just waltz in and force the dwarves to march off, or kill them. The knights, led by known shit disturber Cross, march on Earth Valley and demand a renegotiation of prices, which is turned down, so Cross de-escalates the situation with every tactic he learned from George Bush.
Dwarves are the enemy of humankind! It is time to strike!
This is a bit of an escalation from all the funny joke scenes and giant monster killing. They're being killed off, dude! Oh, wait, I'm a gamer. They're dying for some reason we can't say! The dwarf you escorted early on finds Jack and drags him out to Earth Valley to witness what the knights have done. Jack can't believe they'd attack, and Donovich just wants someone, anyone, the one human he thinks he can trust, to stop the bloodshed. As they arrive, we watch some dwarf, even Donovich has never seen, transform into the Earth Dragon, a long-storied mythical beast, one of the dragons from the intro prophecy, who was hiding out as a dwarf in Earth Valley this whole time. One of the keepers of the natural order. So I guess if he's showing up, things are pretty bad. Cross barely survives, but manages to slay the beast. Bound by grief for his people and ancestral pride in his homeland, the last dwarf standing wanders off to die in Earth Valley. This part of the game is the bleakest moment thus far. The messaging is clear, it's honest about tyrants going to war with the oppressed, and how people won't react instantaneously to that sort of action. Maybe there is a reason. Surely they're not that bad. But I believed in those people. I can't be wrong. I've been lied to. And Radiata Stories isn't done. This moment only precedes a fast-paced unraveling of the plot. Returning home, Jack is approached by Ridley. She seems delirious, unwell, and she asks Jack to come with her. Suddenly, we're presented with the following choice, and the game completely derails. Follow Ridley and turn against the humans entirely, or let her go and wage war against the fairy creatures. This choice is the heart of why Radiata Stories is interesting and worth talking about. Not collecting every friend, and definitely not because it's quirky and cute. The game forces you into Jack's shoes, the kid who's been faffing around all game, understanding nothing and trying his hand at being the biggest gamer, killing the biggest monsters, making the most money, unlocking all the friends, powering up with stronger weapons, learning new skills from your stronger friends. Now, gamer compulsions be damned. You have to pick a side. It's Ridley and the fairies, or everyone you've met otherwise. Everyone you've befriended. The elves, you can't make me give up on my homie, Aiden. He was there when no one else was. Burn them all. Burn them to ash! But it's more complicated than that. Jack is absolutely the kind of kid who doesn't want to pick sides, doesn't really believe in anything except generically trying to be nice to people. He's a fence sitter, and he shows it in both the routes. Most people are fence sitters, so this isn't a surprise. It takes a certain kind of person, someone with a little fire inside, to draw personal boundaries and make them known. To care deeply enough about something to risk social repudiation or even exile. And Radiata Stories knows this, so it forces your hand. Which way, gamer? The human path is the culmination of everything you've worked for over the course of the game. It's the affirmation of the gamer, the collector, the optimizer. After all, you lost your dream unfairly and worked hard for everything you now have. Why would you turn back on that? Jack wanted into the Nights to find his father, learn whatever he could, and this route gives him a door back in. And the key is everything he's built. Suddenly, you're surrounded by the very best in the city, the guild representatives who are holding council with the leaders of the Radiata Knights. It feels so empowering, like you've been fighting all this time and earned your place at the table. It's a little funny that Jack doesn't look any different, though. No scars, no wounds. That's luck plus for you. He's got whatever you've got equipped, and for most of the game, this funny purple armor is easily better than most of what else is on offer. It's giving slay. It's serving warrior princess. You finally hear someone contextualize the intro cinematic. Karen, Jack's father, fought the water dragon years ago, helpfully removing one potential boss from rotation. Thank you, Karen Russell, for helping the developers reach their target release date. The assembled human powers decide it's in the interest of everyone to slay the dragons and crush the fairy creatures who are rising to oppose humanity. We're directly told that killing the dragons could result in calamity, and it's countered with a flippant, "we choose our own fate," which seems irresponsible, but not incorrect. This universe has fundamental rules that allow fairy creatures, or at least the elves, to persist eternally, while humans are left to lead short, hard lives. The chance to overturn that fatal arrangement, or at least prevent their own annihilation, is possible in this sole moment of history, as the dragons return per the prophecy to wipe out human civilization. It's just a little hard to believe in the danger because a single contingent of soldiers took down the Earth Dragon and one man slew another years back. What's two more? I think some of those farmers could do it for a nickel. There are dragons running around, and you're up there playing Idiot of the Week. What are you f***ing? Jack gets his ego stroked by his allies throughout the human path. Larks directly asks for his opinion about killing the dragons, as son of the Dragon Slayer. Larks, this is a child. Have his balls even descended yet? It's not like he's got anything to add. but suddenly people care about him. You're even inducted back into the Knights. It's like getting everything you want, everything except Ridley.
You read too many comics, idiot boy.
Ridley ran off to work with the fairy creatures, but you're not going to see her for a while. You're made to put down the wind dragon, which ends about how you'd expect. Cross makes a fool of himself.
Cross!
Dynas can't handle the dragon. By the way, Dynas is only recruitable for a very brief time in this segment alone, so completionists, God, I'm so sorry. The dragon's a pain in the ass, but not overly challenging. At this point in the game, you've been directed to recruit as many people as possible, and if you find a stronger healer than whoever you've used for the bulk of the game, and anyone else who can take a hit and crack one back, you've got a winning combination. In my case, I missed out on Jarvis, which locked me out of Theodore Vancour's leader, which locked me out of the best characters in the game. But I didn't use the best characters. I used a pretty good Vancour squad captain, an upper-level monk, and a squishy assassin. I healed them with consumables and multi-gauge heals. You can get away with a lot and not sweat it long as you're engaging. Whenever a dragon dies, we get a scene of this advisor having a heart attack, which is supposed to be a mystery, but the game shows us people transforming into dragons, and he gets multiple suspicious camera shots after dropping incredibly arcane knowledge about dragons. He's a dragon, and in this case, he's either the fire dragon, unlikely, or the silver dragon, one of the two demigods that keep the balance of the world in check. So I guess we'll be seeing him in a minute. Eventually, we catch a glimpse of Ridley, armored up for a fight. And yes, the hedgehog! This is Gawain, the father of Gans, who infamously sided with the fairy creatures years ago, turning his back on humanity and living outside the city. So, took after your mom, huh? This is probably my favorite scene in the game, because it's the thesis of Radiata Stories made plain, in case the root split didn't make it clear. You lose the fight, and Gawain says, you know what? You lost because you don't give a shit about anything. Your head is lodged so far up your stupid goober ass you can't see that people all around you are suffering. You're impotent because you're incurious, you're flaccid because you're feckless, you're a fence-sitting centrist goon.
No, of course you don't. After all, you're the one who slays dragons for sport!
Ridley stands up for her favorite mediocre guy, and so Gawain lets him live, but the scene hurts. He's right. Jack doesn't stand for anything or really care about anything more than living day to day, increasing his power and status, and other people as well, fair enough. He's not bad, he's pretty fundamentally good. But so what? Lots of people are basically good. This is a long-standing historical conflict, and by ignorantly inserting himself into it, he's only glorifying his lust for renown, not fighting for a cause. He hasn't even bothered to ask, to educate himself about why Ridley and Gawain care so much, why they would ever turn their backs on the human species. And unfortunately, due to his relative lack of intelligence and everyone else's relative refusal to explain, he never does. It hurts because friendships do end like this, without closure, without explanation, and it's assumed that the offending party has perfect knowledge of what they've done to offend and should simply relent. But that's no path to healing, not really. So Jack does what he can. He locks in and focuses on his own path. In fact, almost every cosmological explanation of the universe happens when Jack isn't on screen. Aphelion, the silver dragon, and the funny money Weezer, the fire dragon, argue about these phenomena while you're off sealing up demons at the old castle wherein the ancient elven king first contracted the mysterious illness, Algendar's disease, named after the castle it appeared in. As a player, you're probably expecting to find some means to solve the issue, make humans and fairy creatures live in peace, cure Algendar's disease. But it never happens. You're strapped into the endgame and en route to a harsh conclusion no matter which path you take. Damn, really cutting deep with the philosophical content, you know? Which came first? The bros or the hoes? In the human story, the fire dragon attacks the city and kills General Dynas. It's interesting that you're able to recruit him for this incredibly short period of time, only for the guy to shuffle off in a few scenes. What's the point of that? To antagonize completionists? To raise the stakes? To communicate that humans live short, painful lives? Maybe all. Maybe all of them, though. Jack killing the fire dragon is really the last straw for his good guy routine. He's forced into battle with people he looked at as friendly and keeps walking away miserable. And it's because he's fighting people with purpose, and oftentimes putting them down in the name of whoever employs him. He's a pawn in a cosmic chess game, and he hates it. If the assassination attempt and Gawain didn't spell it out, this is the price of progress. This is what it means to arrogantly assert yourself on the stage of history. By the time Jack does get a personal explanation of the prophecy, the dragons, the impending calamity, he's already in too deep, his father having killed the water dragon, Cross killing the earth dragon, and the remaining 2 lesser dragons in his own kill count, leaving only the fairy creatures and the silver dragon as the last opposition to humanity. And it's looking like humans are going to persist for once, avoid total annihilation, but it's going to come at the cost of entire species. It's okay, Jack, hear me out. You already went out and eradicated whole swaths of goblins and elves earlier on this path, you little colonizer. Now go on and finish the job. Jack doesn't want everyone he loves to die, so it's the fairy creatures or the townies who haven't done anything wrong. Gan sends you a letter around this time, deciding to leave the city. You never touched base with him after joining Theater Vancour. It's excruciating. It's what I love about the experience, how perpetually melancholy, how real this ridiculous, cartoony world is. Gans is just another past friend who drifted away. Your little trio is totally beyond reforming. Things can never go back to the way they were. Please tell me anyone else is living through a similar situation, because it will kill me if I'm feeling this alone.
Lucia, Kuramu, Korosu, Tamu,
Oh god, she's speaking in tongues. I'll get the bat. Ow! You can't be talking like that! Before this path wraps up, you face Ridley and Gawain one final time just outside of your house. It's too late for explanations, it's too heated for rationality. The stage is set and the pawns are put to work. The most disgusting scene in the game follows this confrontation. Elves, goblins, orcs all approach the gates with weapons drawn, and you're made to put them all down, group by group, killing them off for good. The fairy creatures know that if you persist in killing the silver dragon, they will die. Humans will grow too powerful, Algandar's disease will manifest in all of them eventually, and take them permanently, anchor their souls, and strip them of their immortality. Zane himself is inflicted with the disease and knows his time is short. It's a last desperate gasp for survival. They feel they have no option but open conflict. It's a smaller physical battle than the text suggests, which implies it's a mass extinction event, and the only reason this path gets away without being explicitly labeled the evil route is the fairy creatures throw themselves at you. You're not made to hunt them down and imperialize them, enslave them like the dwarves, or execute them outright, how it would have happened if this battle didn't happen. It crunches down so much inevitable suffering into one climactic battle.
No! Please! Someone! Save my soul!
Jesus. They make a point of that, by the way. What it sounds like when someone who's lived for presumably all time is suddenly faced with the void. But it only serves to embolden the humans. They already live short lives and they don't want to face instant extinction, so they rush off to seize fate and slay the silver dragon. Before you're free to run off and change the status quo, you're faced down by Gawain, for keeps this time. The idea is that Jack has finally gained resolve, and so he's able to put the guy down, and he does. Actually manages to kill a human character for once. That never happens. That's nuts. But it demonstrates how far gone Jack is. What's the point of resolve if it makes you complicit in mass murder? He asks his father if he made the right choice, and really, we don't know. There is no right choice in Radiata, no matter how tempting either path looks. Like Gawain said, it's about resolve, and a lot of cold comfort. This final dungeon is so funny. And by funny, I mean, I'm gonna have an aneurysm. You're meant to climb a series of ladders, up and down, navigating the way to the final tower, but sand will occasionally fall from the heavens, sending you down 1, 2, 3 floors sometimes. It's surreal. They put one right before the door to the final boss. I actually think more games should do this. You know, good sales and positive words are cool, but what's more important is the cultural impact of generating scores and scores of cry-mad apoplexy on the internet. You meet Lucian, who suspiciously asks for help, though we already know his deal. Jack appeals to Ridley's human nature to snap her out of the gold dragon's ritual, to inhabit Ridley's body and carry on the cycle. Cross shows up to finally reveal Lucian's identity before being killed instantly. Man, let me handle him. Seriously, no need to overwork yourself. I'll chuck him off the tower and make sure you're quick to follow. Lucian fully interrupts the gold dragon's ritual thanks to your disruption, and he kills Ridley in the blast, meaning the gold dragon can't properly enter the mortal realm and begin a new cycle. As Lucian says, we've changed the fate of humanity, built a new cosmic order. Now humans will live until the world burns up with them. So, real life, basically. Lucian's shocked at Jack's angry reaction. He is on the side of humans, but it's a utilitarian or a logical sort of love, the needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few. You get the picture. He can't grasp why Jack can't put his petty feelings aside over one girl when the whole species is safe now, and even moves to kill Jack instead of simply vanishing. It's kind of bizarre, but video games, sure. We battle it out one last time. It's a surprisingly easy fight, considering the guide wants me to be a certain level and fully decked out with the best party members, when realistically, you can just mug him to death with some monks. With one of the cosmic duo dead and the other unable to manifest, the world is now a plum ripe for human plucking. Ultimately, the people of Radiata City celebrate. Peace returns to the land, the threat of the dragons, prophecy, and the fairy creatures is entirely extinguished. Humans are free to expand across the world with no fear of repercussions, with no pesky treaties to abide by or war bands to battle, and everyone's life goes back to how it was before. Jack lost none of his friendless pals, and yet he leaves town in the ending cutscene, back turned to the city. He isn't celebrating. It's bittersweet, and the context demands it. He lost the girl he probably loved, and his old captain. He killed a man and hurt a lot of people who were merely fighting against the call of the void. Jack fought specifically to save his species and return things to the way they were, but found, maybe, that they couldn't. Not really, because the Jack that found the resolve to kill could find no real home in his old life. He was content, felt like he fit in when he was no one. The fairy path is the sadder path. After all, you turn your back on your people. The text box warns you, you'll lose access to your previously made friends. And that's not a lie. If you spent hours painstakingly collecting every friend you could find and waltzed into the fairy path to secure Ridley, they're gone. Hours spent with these digital personas hearing their goofy combat dialogue training them up. Whole missions carried by a handful of good friends for nothing. Ridley isn't even clear about her plan. She keeps mumbling about destiny, and Jack's really only along for the ride because he likes her, genuinely cares about her, enough that this version of the character is willing to forsake everyone else. Radiata Stories makes a point of twisting the knife by making either side, human and fairy, broadly unsympathetic. If anything, the other side, the one you didn't pick, comes across as more sympathetic in the opposing story path. It's infuriating. Just as Ridley leads you to the City of Flowers, the gate guards immediately threaten her life for being human. And we only manage to walk away with our skin because Ridley mentions the transpiration ritual by name, and Jack offers to capture a strategically valuable fort. Not because Zane, Lord of the Elves, cares about you, only what you can do for him. Glad I deleted all my Facebook friends for this. Thanks, Zane. Mind you, this is what you expect from a story involving long-standing conflicts between opposing groups. In this situation, humans are the oppressor. They enslaved the dwarves. The game is not confused about that point, and they encroached on everyone else. The elves infer bad things about your character because that's what they've been led to believe. As far as anyone in this setting knows, being friendly with humans may as well cause the illness that first truly killed an elf. The treatment sucks, but you expect it, trying to sort out a whole history of bad relations by yourself. It just makes it hard to find any particular path, human or fairy, heroic. Like Gans foreshadowed, Fort Halencia ends up being a pivotal asset in the human-fairy conflict. You're made to take the fort, but you're quickly surrounded by your old pals Leonard and Natalie, who Ridley's father sent out to ensure her safety.
Listen, Jack, you'd better come clean if you don't want to make things worse for yourself.
And even in these heart-wrenching, character-betraying moments, Radiata pulls out the humor.
I'll spare your life, but you have to do exactly as I say.
Exactly as you say? No, not that! No! Stop, you horrible monster! You beast!
You know what?
Oh, I see. I just assumed...
Assumed? Your old Radiata room leader pulled out an axe to kill you with? And we're doing this. At least you actually enter the City of Elves for once. Get an elven assassin friend who likes poetry. Fair enough. I guess that's worth the heartbreak. You really are a bad guy, Jack. Two things happen that characterize the fairy path best. First, the roads are littered with human enemies, and not nameless NPCs. It's the people of Radiata City, people from the Void community, the Elashian Order, people from Theater Vancour, your friends. There's no dialogue, no special acknowledgement. You get in a fight, you finish it. Nobody dies this way. You can't kill an old friend, but Radiata Stories wants to make things painful. It denies you communication. As far as friendship goes, you might as well be dead to the other. Second, after recapturing Fort Halencia, you're met with the friend book and realize you still need friends. Radiata Stories is a party game, and the hardest challenges have yet to come. So, you set about making friends in the fortress. There's a guy playing with a ball, two shopkeepers fighting over a space, an elf who can't help himself from challenging someone far stronger, a dwarf who can't stop drinking. What, am I supposed to kill the Radiata Knights with a soccer fan and a alcoholic? It's kind of like playing Radiata Stories all over again. You're back at zero, surrounded by the most average Joes imaginable, and you realize that, regardless of whoever you talk to on the long path to this point, that fairy creatures are regular people. They're not really fundamentally different, not in their actions, not in their hearts. The elves' long-lived souls don't really make them overly wise. They bicker, they have vices, and they play. In this way, Radiata Stories wants to cast off tropes like the noble savage and most Tolkien-esque elf cliches, among other fantasy tropes, by making them entirely too human. I wish the fairy path was more about friendship with fairy creatures, actually. Maybe a little bit from elves about having basic respect for the land, and opposition to consumerism, expansionism. The dwarves could get Jack really drunk. It's just such fertile ground for a powerful story, but what ends up happening is the player watching Jack get fed through the taffy-pulling devices everyone he ever cared about turns against him, and he's labeled a traitor. His own sister Adele is imprisoned by the Knights in case she's colluding with him. Jeez, guys, you already did the worst thing you could have done to the guy. Think! He's a regular, mediocre dude. All you had to do was tell him he was unlikable. Instant death, spirit untethered, no greater harm can befall a mediocre guy. The plot does use some of its time wisely. You're sent off to recruit all manner of creatures, and some of those are the Black Goblins, and their home happens to be where Gawain is hanging out. Gawain is a cool character. He's got a weird weapon, he's got a crossbow-like guts, he's stronger than almost anyone, and he looks completely unhinged. The type of guy you'd only see one of in this world, or every single day on the New York City subway. Gawain has a history with your father, and in this path, he takes up that mantle a little, helps give closure, even hands your father's sword to you after beating him in battle. And I like that a lot. Radiata Stories knows you've lost everybody, and with the immediacy of the quest, Jack has no real time for his own motivations or interests. You're adrift, completely. You've been cut off, physically, from most of what Radiata Stories has been, the city. And Gawain's here to ground you, if only for a moment. And it really is just a moment or two. Jarvis and Daniel swing by to bring you back or put you down, and you're forced to beat them up. They don't understand what you're doing, why you're doing it. The player probably doesn't either, if we're being honest. We know humans are the cause of misery for fairy creatures, and the human path frames you as the villain. But here, amidst confusing allies and unclear destinies, it truly feels like you're being strung along, beating back every last connection you had to the life you knew. Like the human path, Radiata Stories says clearly that the way to progress won't come without loss. It's not just these two, by the way. You're made to fight Elwyn, and eventually Gerald, both of whom walk off. You've made your choice, and they respect it. Elwyn's a bit of an oddity because she's easily more powerful than the player. I lost to her in my run, but the game allows you to continue anyway. Jack Russell, maybe you will be the one who saves us all. We'll check in on that later. You're still fed extraneous information throughout the path, stuff Jack doesn't know because he's not present during these shots. But as the player, you find out, when Ridley falls sick because her transpiritated soul is undergoing changes, that Zane is using her for his own ends, allowing her soul to become a vessel for the Gold Dragon, with the intent to start a new cycle, which would effectively wipe out all of humanity. Not that the player understands that yet. You're made to distrust and despise this character at every turn, and yet Ridley herself leads you under a tree and confesses that while you aren't going to understand what's going on, she's accepted that her situation is unique, two souls reside within her, and she's resolved to become the vessel for the gold dragon. So regardless of scheming, regardless of the bad vibes, we're stuck supporting Ridley to the end. It's the basic principle that defines the entire path. Though the human characters imply you've chosen your own path, you're effectively dragged around by Ridley, who's dragged around by destiny. But it's like Elwyn says, when you meet her, that is. True strength is only attainable by those who fight for someone else. Ridley's an interesting case as well. Her sudden turn isn't completely unjustified or out of character or whatever. Though it might feel a bit fast on a first playthrough, this is a person who felt unnecessarily collared her entire life. She earned a spot in the Radiata Knights only to have her father truss her up in officer clothes and have her perform low-grade, nepotistic knighthood, forever denied the joy of earning anything for herself beyond the sole begrudging honor she fought for and won. Her prize? She's trapped in a bubble, a little snow globe imitation of knighthood, and handed over to a man she hates to boot. When she's given something worth dying for, place in the fate of the world, she takes it without hesitation. Something to fight for. Something worth doing.
Cool. It's like the secret forts we used to build when I was a kid.
Forts?
You didn't build forts?
I didn't have time for children's games. I was too busy studying fencing and etiquette.
Okay, but it doesn't sound like you had much fun.
What would you know about it?
Even born into privilege, people need a reason to wake up before they come alive. That's why she likes Jack, even. He's unpretentious. He doesn't want anything from her. He just wants her to be okay. In a world of absolute falsehood, he's the only real thing she knows. It's not all gloomy. Gans returns, having freed Adele from captivity, and all the thieving paid off. I was not expecting that to factor in, but here we are.
Well, Master Jack, finally, a sufficient pretext to wreak bloody havoc on those bastard knights.
Cross kills the fire dragon in this route. Yeah, that's how much of an asshole you are in the human path. You were standing where Cross is now. And yeah, the guy sucks, but it's no surprise he pulls it off. I think a box of Twinkies could pull it off. I think a small cloud of gas in a match could pull it off. One thing a story like this should answer is, well, what does it look like to work with people you hate? Jack has a thing about orcs. He thinks they stink. He thinks they're evil. Blood orcs attacked early in the game, and that's supposed to be a traumatic awakening moment, but we, the player, have no real reason to think orcs are pure evil or uniquely powerful. They happened to be a high level when they fought us. They didn't vaporize us with a big Volti attack. Okay, that's been humans so far?
Talk about ludonarrative dissonance.
Anyway, you're forced to recruit some orcs, and just as Jack is on the verge of dropping a slur, humans attack. The game is so thorough about this delicate balance of making sure you hate who you're working with and making it impossible to do otherwise. Man, Jack, what's wrong with the orcs? They just want to build burrows and rush riders and say dog all day. What's going on, man? You're not allowed to kill Cross here, despite easily overpowering him. Same old bit about, we be just as bad as them, etc., etc. Except no, not really. Cross is a monster, and it was confirmed earlier on that he captured and released the orc into the Elflands that almost killed Ridley, his own bride-to-be. The game spends so much time making him look like an obnoxious, bigoted scumbag, and the minute Jack has the chance to do something about it, the game remembers. The player can't be too invested, can't take too much action, because that's the purview of the other characters, and not Jack.
Sit on that fence post and spin.
It's frustrating because it's the kind of strategic blow the elves would absolutely make, taking out an enemy commander, especially one who, alone, chose to attack the elves, and dwarves intentionally ignoring the general and going rogue, creating open conflict. He'd be court-martialed for war crimes in a pretend just world, and it's only empathetic human hands that try to stop the inevitable, as though there were any chance for redemption. Jack's already labeled a traitor, and Cross is only going to continue being the worst.
But I will the moment we get back to the castle.
What did I just say? Look at me. What did I just say? Despite all of this, Cross is necessary to give any tangible on-screen credence to anti-human sentiment. Nearly every other character is neutral on the fairy creatures or willing to take a diplomatic approach. Someone had to buck the neolibs. Someone had to tip the scales. One man alone gets to carry the weighty cross of humanity's sins, and so he's left to enshitify everything for everyone alone. I just wish the characters would recognize a sociopathic tyrant on first pass, maybe televise his death or something. It's such a bleak story for something that seemed closer to the just path, if not the good path. Ridley mentions that the leader of the elves has Algendar's disease, which will inevitably kill him and render his soul unable to persist eternally, and blames cosmic imbalance for the illness's inception. It's a little out there, a little immaterial, but so profoundly pessimistic. Humans can't be too powerful, and elves can't be too negligent, apparently, or else Algendar's will spread, the world will correct itself. It's unfortunate that the game chose to muddy the narrative with what appeared like a racism allegory when it really wants to make the very common but fair critique that the human species is too industrious, too ambitious, and too willing to disrupt the natural balance of the earth in the pursuit of wealth, power, and prestige. This critique of humankind, with fairy creatures as the counterweight, personifies the natural world as a series of disparate races and blames them for being negligent, which just doesn't work. We don't blame the wind for blowing too hard or the ice caps for melting. We truly only have money-hungry corporations, the greed of the few, who have an active hand in environmental disruption to blame for that sort of imbalance. In that sense, Radiata Stories, and particularly the Fairy Path, fails to offer a meaningful, direct message, too concerned with giving both sides a fair shake and offloading blame to the wrong actors, choosing to say that both sides are to blame. It's like blaming any single citizen for being kind of bad at recycling for the world's foundational woes, when expansionists, the elite, and those nearby who failed to keep petty tyrants like him in check are actually to blame. Or blaming the ocean for not dropping a sufficient number of tidal waves on human civilization so they don't produce too much gas. That's the absolute worst thing I can say about the experience, and it doesn't render the thing meaningless. It's just the consequence of trying to both sides an intractable conflict with a clear aggressor. So, the arbitrator. Adele hands you your father's sword in the intro, but you can't actually equip the thing at any point unless you take the fairy path. Apparently it's got the taint of Algendar's, so it would be harmful if unsealed. Gawain will hand you the blade when you're ready to handle it. It's called the Decision Maker's Sword even, which has some odd implications. It implies that Algendar's is something you can spiritually overcome, simply by having sufficient resolve. It implies that the human path Jack never actually finds resolve, despite finding it sufficiently enough to impress Gawain, despite being strung along throughout the fairy path and never really feeling confident in the choice you made. And that's fine enough as an individual metaphor, like a spiritual block to power that the wielder must overcome. Sure, cool. But Algendar's itself is not that kind of illness, you know? The jail guard and the ancient elf king didn't suffer from a lack of resolve. One just caught the sickness, and the other cream-pied a human. Algendar's is such a shitty illness as a concept because it works to drive the fairy creatures to action. That's true, that's great, but it doesn't harm nearly enough regular people over the course of the game to be any kind of cosmic correcting force the way it's meant to be. Elves face permanent death if they catch it. Humans face temporary insanity, and everything goes back to normal if you hit them really hard. I'm surprised this is never addressed, that the people of Radiata don't start experiencing the illness en masse as they grow more powerful and defeat the dragons, causing the mad ambition of the human species to make human civilization implode, as the tower imagery would suggest, struck down in their prime. It might have been tabled at some point, but for now, the explicitly evil route, the one where you kill scores of people, ultimately comes without cost to the humans, and that says nothing, communicates nothing, except a weird fascistic worldview where might makes right and only the strong survive, and even if it's evil, pave your roads with the bones of your foes, because who's gonna stop you? Guilt? Having a conscience? Lol. Even at the end of the world, you're stopped from killing Cross. It's amazing. This time, Jack himself says, no, killing is wrong. Dude is now a pile of smoldering ash. The silver dragon awoke, flew from Radiata Castle, came here just for the exact moment to give Cross a proper send-off. I mean, it's funny, but I was really hoping to push him off the sides of the catwalks here. The final dungeon is identical, but the confrontation at the tower is different. Ridley is set to become the next vessel for the Gold Dragon and usher in a cycle reset, as it were, wiping everyone out and starting again. Aphelion, the Silver Dragon, has spent so much time with humans that he's fallen in love and considers the fundamental rules of nature, the ones that have governed the world since its inception, unjust and worth discarding. Humans, he believes, live witheringly short lives and are unfairly denied the permanence of elves. They live, they love, they die. Jack wavers even here because in the end, he doesn't really believe in the fairy creatures, the elves, orcs, or goblins. He only cares about Ridley. The tower confrontation is a little different in the fairy path, as you'd expect. Lucian is framed a little more villainously, if only because he's your enemy this time. Gans is here. You stop the ritual not unlike the human path, preventing the gold dragon from manifesting immediately, and Aphelion picks a fight right there. Gawain teleports into frame to save his son. Aphelion drops a hint that his motivations aren't entirely selfless. Because the universe runs on a cyclical treadmill, Aphelion is put to sleep when the gold dragon manifests, meaning that despite his good intentions, there's a whiff of a power grab in there. The fight would be kinda hard, but you see, JJ is my homie, and he deals a significant amount of damage. So Aphelion says some dumbass nonsense about humans only having dragon overlords because they willed it, which is wild. I don't think anybody in the setting really knows about the cosmological order keeping dragons, minus about 3-4 people tops, so we're gonna have to handwave that as late-game text filler. Even stranger, Gan stays behind with the corpse of his father as the tower crumbles, presumably killing him. Why? Why? In the end, Jack leads Ridley back to the city with a little or all of the gold dragon inside of her, totally alone in the aftermath, and left to repopulate the human species, while Zane laughs maniacally in his little fortress. It's a bitter end, losing everyone you ever trained with, adventured with, even Gans. Olwen, did we save everyone? It teaches you Aphelion's pain. So many souls snuffed in a single moment, and all to prevent the utter extermination of the fairy creatures. The story made it clear it was one or the other, no compromise, and while it's radical, there's something in it anyway. If it really is a critique of humans meddling with the natural order, well, looking at the data, this silly little fantasy story is looking more realistic by the day. Of course, there's post-game content to slash through as well. It's a tri-ace game. They've done a lot of self-referential stuff, and listen, I'm a little more critical of that kind of thing than I maybe need to be. As we know, the quality of a film can be counted in the number of Easter eggs, no doubt. Why can't Radiata just be Radiata and not have an extended cinematic universe, tri-ace? But I understand the impulse when you're a tight-knit dev team with a core group of fans and a specific vision for your games, and apparently a set of interconnected worlds. First of all, Lenneth Valkyrie is recruitable. I clapped when I saw— No, but really, I clapped. I love Valkyrie Profile. Go play Valkyrie Profile. Always. Right now, preferably. Mysteriously, she tries to recruit you via combat, so tries to kill you. Little out of character, I think, usually deals with recently deceased people or the nearly dead. Oh my god, she did the slide. Oh! But we managed to beat her down and recruit her instead. Inferior. What the hell is that? The Kids Bop version of Inferior? You have to put down the 4 elemental dragons in this dungeon, so sorry, Karen Russell. Points rescinded for saving the developers 0 time and not actually finishing off the water dragon. Couldn't even finish the job. You know, I used to respect you. The Karen fight is pretty abrupt. Like, hey dad, there you are. Let's go! Oh shit!
How to connect with dad. Battle.
The weak fade away. That's how this world is.
Damn dad, I didn't know you were an objectivist shitheel. Well, never meet your heroes, as they say. The post-dungeon is really a mix of Radiata Stories' theological foundation and absurdist tri-ace Ouroboros slop tent, okay? You fight some other dragon you've never heard of. Basically the spirit of humanity, as it were.
Radiant of idleness and approval and doldrums and intoxication and lightness.
Loving that it's 2D, shallow, and two-faced. Like people! And then there's Lazard. Normally I do a funny PogChamp or say, "Why are you here?" But this is the mage who fell in love with Valkyrie and hunted her over multiple games. This game is stalking, man. What is it with Radiata Stories and stalking? The full weight of the crossover material hits with the final two bosses, Gabriel Celesta and the Ethereal Queen.
So, like, this is like a JoJo's character. This is just a JoJo's character.
They're both post-game super bosses in past Star Ocean titles. They're not super interesting to commentate on their own, but I love reading walkthroughs. Your party should be Elwyn, Kain, and Lenneth. Translation: the three strongest characters, minus Nyx, who Lenneth is replacing. You do not need... Man! This one person who uploaded their walkthrough to YouTube handled it with Lenneth, Rocky, strong characters, sure, but also Clive. Do you understand what that means? Nothing matters. All is falsehood. Praise Hick Jesus! I told you I couldn't do nothing, but in a manner of speaking, everything is nothing. Now, Gabriel Celesta just isn't much of a challenge, and the Ethereal Queen can combo you to death with at least 2 different moves, so it's more patience and precision than anything else. The disturbing part is realizing Anastasia, the leader of one of the Elatian Order factions, has a Volti attack that references these characters, and indeed, they're worshipped as gods by the Order and visible, carved into stone on the cathedral. Radiata Stories was always references. That is the second DBZ reference. Radiata Stories, much like its cyclical internal reality, is just another one of Triace's many, many visions of the Earth and its people. Radiata Stories was an enormous project. It's obvious in every aspect of the game's creation, but what specifically sticks out to me is the honesty underpinning the entire experience. Creative works account for most of the honesty any of us engage with. I appreciate a game willing to illustrate the truth. The human path is striking. The willingness to put on screen the very human desire to keep everything under control, maintain all of your friends, never bump up against anyone, but being forced to anyway, because no matter what you do, things are going to spiral out of control, slip between your fingers. And Jack leaving the city in the end is an acknowledgement that regardless of how many friends you have, how much support, how much of a community you've fostered, some parts of your life require you to improve yourself on your own and learn to live with your individual being. You know, friends are important, but at the end of the day, you're living in first person. The fairy path is a much more straightforward illustration of something most of us will encounter at some point in our lives, provided we care about anything at all, any cause, any lofty goal, which is that you will be made singular, a pariah, for caring about something when other people in your community don't. At its core, Radiata Stories is about people and friendship. It shows us so many completely different lives, people expected to wake up, go about their daily existence, and keep on. It's not a new concept. Plenty of games, and games I've mentioned on this channel, are powerful to me because they care about dignifying the infinite fractals of human existence, because we do matter, and our unique qualities are beautiful. But Radiata Stories goes further than letting you recruit any NPC into your combat party and training up whoever you like, learning from whoever you want. Radiata Stories understands what it means to be a person, what it means to make friends, what it means to lose them. I went into the game hoping to recruit every single character, complete the game, so I could show everyone how much I understood Radiata Stories, so I could get the only real reward for unlocking every entry in the friend book, a JPEG. But I got to that midway point and realized that the proverbial rug was pulled the minute I made the effort, a developer joke. You aren't allowed to recruit every friend in one run, anyway. It's possible to complete the friend list by carrying your progress over into New Game Plus and filling out the other half then, the people you turned away from in-game. But that requires 2 full runs, 2 parallel realities, neither of which can ever be a whole. Radiata Stories makes you Jack. It presents this comedic, ridiculous, arrogant upstart punk, and it looks at the player and says, this is you. You are Jack. You share his incomplete perspective and his lack of historical context for the events of the game, and more importantly, you have the arrogance to look at the back of the box, see 170 recruitable characters, and like any video game enjoyer, compulsively attempt to collect them all. But people aren't Pokemon. They're varied and complex, and they grew up different than you did, and it's never going to be as simple as wanting a friend and getting one. And when the game slaps you with a reality check, the hard truth that not all people can fit together, that lives are mismatched puzzle pieces, that intractable conflicts must necessarily exist in a world of so many varied perspectives, you're left stunned, unable to act. Thankfully, you have something Jack doesn't. Agency. You're a person, after all, and you can make a couple of save files. You can do it over again. But Jack can't. The weight, the brilliance of the story doesn't come from the specific events, which ending is canon or which ending is more meaningful, but in having to make the choice and commit to that reality, in choosing to cast off a whole group of people. Because in life, you will face thresholds and make choices from which there is no return. And if you care about something enough, you will lose people just the same way. You will find yourself on the outside for believing in something. It mocks the naive player who might assume there's a way to pave over all the strife, or look the other way. But since you're wrapped up in causes that far outstrip you, it successfully tells the player that there is no way out of this. You have to choose. I've cared about a lot of causes in my life and alienated friends because of it. I've pushed people away specifically because they crossed boundaries, particularly over personal beliefs, and those self-inflicted wounds have never stopped stinging. It's not supposed to be like this, I'd tell myself. I shouldn't have to do this. Or worse, they shouldn't think that way. Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should act like it doesn't bother me. After all, not every friend in the friend group thinks like I do, and none of them are making such clear boundaries. Maybe I'm the bad guy for caring. But when it's a wide enough threshold, it gets so much easier to accept that reaching is impossible. It's just that the threshold is itself a wound that never really closes. As I played through the endings, especially the fairy path, I thought about the friends I failed to make or failed to keep. Friendship meant a lot to me growing up. I used to say things like, friends are more important than family, and admittedly I was young and naive, but it takes a certain set of circumstances to provoke a thought like that. Friends matter a lot to me. I was a pretty lonely kid in early elementary school, didn't feel like I fit in very well, but I made plenty through grade 5 and on. And I'm one of the very few people who had a great time in high school and didn't bully anyone. I felt liked, or liked enough, but as I moved into university and into the job market, the reality of who I was became a lot more apparent. In high school, I was confident. Afterwards, I wasn't, or my brand of confidence wasn't appreciated. And so I bumped up against plenty of people, created friction, and not a lot of friends. I was insular and focused on myself. I remember losing friends in a mutual rental situation because they were frankly awful roommates, and that gap was never gonna get bridged. I remember barely having made university friends and never keeping up with them how I should have, because I was always on to the next thing and they were impossibly far away. Some of the people I've known for the shortest time stuck with me the most, but drifted away from sheer distance. I remember thinking I had a certain friend and never being contacted by them again after my degree, wondering if everyone else was just like me, bad at keeping in contact, or if I was just another passing person, nothing special. After school and before YouTube, even during the early years of YouTube, I lost so much of the self-concept that brought me confidence because suddenly that person wasn't needed or desirable or enthralling. Maybe I was too weird. Maybe I was too annoying. I didn't know how to fix those things. If I were like Jack, if I had exactly enough status or the perfect chipper attitude, or I went out of my way to help everyone, wormed my way into their lives, could I have gained or maintained those friendships? Even still, in some of those cases, I just wasn't where I needed to be, like as a person, to maintain certain friendships. I've changed so much over the years, and sometimes the timing isn't right, might never be right. And I've done this little online gig so long, I've learned exactly why people aren't always keen to make new friends when they only ever catch you in glimpses, sometimes unflattering, or worse, watch the endless parade of clout-hungry parasites sink in and slowly detach when you've got nothing to give. If you open the friend book, you get this hilarious little image, me and my friends. Every friend you make is recorded in this book, and it's the primary target for completion across New Game Plus playthroughs. Collect all the entries. Any given entry amounts to about 3, maybe 4 sentences, a necessary limitation for video game production. There's no way a team can spare a fully paid employee to write pages of backstory for every character, let alone 170. These pages also speak the truth. How many friends do you make in Radiata Stories? Ridley, Gans, Daniel, Jarvis? You work with a few consistent names for a long time, fighting alongside them or working through their struggles, lending a hand. These are people you bond with, but so many of the characters are just tag-alongs, people you happen to blow by at the right time. Some of them aren't your friends, but clout chasers, people interested in your status and power who try to ride your coattails. Others are people you're told to pester until they open up. Others have secrets you'll uncover, and they lend their services to you explicitly so you hold your tongue. Still others are the people you made a point to befriend for something they had, an innate character skill, quality healing. These are not friends, and this is not friendship. But friendship takes many forms, and the word is malleable enough to account for the fair weather kind. Maybe it's my mistake for thinking of friendship as some immutable golden virtue, more important than family, when it's mostly liquid. Like the characters of Radiata Stories, like Jack himself, we're all stuck in our own lives. We're always moving on. Regardless of who you make genuine bonds with, all are reduced to those 3 to 4 sentences, a single page in a book. I think about my own friends. I could fill up more than a few pages for any one of them, but these are people I've known for decades. I could just as easily write a few sentences about anyone I've ever met online, and yet I myself could just as easily fit into 3 to 4 sentences. YouTuber who lived in Korea for a year, a little too verbose and a little too annoying, a bit of a workaholic. Did you know he worked in education? Maybe that's all I can ever aspire to be to some people. It's better than the alternative. Didn't like Metroid Prime enough, didn't cover Devil May Cry right, was wrong about... And all the people you meet who vanish, and all the names you recognize who you manage to bother without trying, and all the silence, and all the noise. It's so lonely knowing the whole of your being is so easily reducible. That's what distinguishes friends from the people you've met, people you've seen. They're not supposed to reduce. They're supposed to accept and admire the fullness of your being, appreciate who you are. And still, when people are so strapped for time, drained by a society that demands endless labor to pay something as profoundly absurd as the cost of living, how can any of us arrogantly demand to be anything more to anyone else? I look at the schedules of these characters and see myself, again, reduced to numbers. Sleep till 9 a.m., wake up, eat something, drink coffee, shower, work, take a break to exercise, short walk maybe, return to work, prep and cook dinner, eat and watch TV, make coffee and get back to work, wind down, sleep, every single day. I can fit my daily life into a Radiata Stories character schedule. In working to live, in making my videos, I become as artificial, as flat and boring and reducible as any individual character in the game. I suddenly deserve those 3 to 4 sentences. Maybe it's that those old friends drifted away because I never made myself anything more than those sentences to so many of them. I could have handled so many relationships differently, but if I ran things back, would anything actually change? I'm still the same person, same weaknesses, I still have the same financial needs and relative inability to manage the safer path I initially planned that thrust me into hard-ass work in the first place. I'd still have my old friends anyway. I'd still look at faraway friends as friendships that can't truly, consistently, routinely grow, and I'd probably put my time exactly where I put it before. And it's all conjecture anyway because there is no going back. Only what was. And what's next. There's a scene before the Human Path ending where you watch fireworks, a date. The game trawls through the data and decides the companion is whichever female companion you've spent the most time with. I wasn't aware of the technical aspect and was surprised to find Jack paired up with Flora, the healer I recruited early on, who carried well over half the game. Did I miss something? Were Jack and Flora supposed to be lovers? What about Ridley? But Ridley lives in a castle and you live in a dump. She may grow to like you throughout the game, but she's so far away. In your life and in personality. She has a vision and you have your grind. She likes you because you're a passing fancy. And the truth is, the person you love, the person who matters most to you, is the person you spend the most time with. It's so obvious. I didn't pick or choose my date. The game chose for me, knowing that in a sense, I had chosen. The people who matter most to you are the people you spend the most time with. The people who love you the most are the ones who spend the most time on you. It occurs to me that either ending leaves Jack without friends. The fairy path will leave him alone with Ridley, barely human. The human path will leave him alone on the road. The things you need the most have a way of making their way to you. Radiata Stories hit me at a time in my life when I needed the resolve to acknowledge my own ability, no qualifiers, no preface, and to move forward regardless of who's coming. Sure, you'll need people to get anywhere on this earth, maybe even help point you in the right direction. But once you're truly confident in your destination, you'll find bees where you pass flowers and worms in the rain. Hey, it's KBash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welsh, Air Pirate C, Acropolin, Alfred Coria, All the Singularities, Alpha 42, Andrew Redacted, Angel Rivera, Anthony, Aria, Aaron, Arschwasser, Ashley, my wife, my darling. I asked KBash to make you smile. Also, hi, Merrick, Azrael, Azura, Atticure, Axinate, Bear Skeleton, Basement Dweller, Bosch 7, Ben M, Beguile, Big Papa Spray, Blake Against the Machine, Wargle Hargle, Blossom Dante, Boom Dead, BH Operator, Born in Shadow, Brandon S, Brandon Hesse, British Gooch, Cow, Cajun Lady, Pixar, Can I Cuss on Here? C-Dub, Cat Girls Are Real, Caesar T, Hero Hero, Court Fox, Cordit, Chris Bromo, Cody Goldie, Comfy Moogle, Couch Moba, Crabmonger, Fish Finagler, Crashgers, Crater, Chris BJ, Tono 19D, Cup of the Puppa, CW Glassworks, Denny Pangos, Danky Steaks, Swaggy David Castillo, Dara, Dash Granny, Decode, Deadword, Dead, The Straga, Dingus Back, don't read this out loud, oh no, he did Doodle Flu, Doug Prince, DJ, Professor K, Dr. Cullen PhD, Drop the Bait, The Protagonist, Elias, Elpio, Elsa, Emperor Pickle, Empty Tenchi, Eric Monticello, Excalibur Shines, Gnar, Fail Knight, Ferns Maximum, Fuzillion, Forte Noir, Frog Vormis, Garen Guarantee, Giggle Bite, Glasses Kohai, Glyph Seeker, Nine Cat, Gobo Bobo, Goose 6112, Gray, The Darkest Black, Corey, Gucci Plant, Hatsune Miku's Crack House, Demon, Game and Station, Hermit J, Hi Pixie, Hebe, Honey Mutts, Horn Tiger, how do you know? Huey, I just took 7 grams of magic mushrooms and now I'm lost in the woods. I'm supporting KBash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer. Inferno galore. Ingenious Cloud. IOPG. I punched a sandwich. It's not bad. It's time to sue. It's not good. Ivy Ruth Langley. Jack Hydrick. Jacob. Jalopy. James. Jank Dankins. Jason Lasky. Jaden. James Vaughn. Jay Drito. JL Savarus. Jay Deus. JK Hedgehog. John Bo the Joker. Jordan Joyner. Jorzy Burden. Juicy Frost. June. Kadoken. Kaizetta Slow. K-Chan. KBash's best K. Keegan Too Cool. Keith the Thief. Kata Snack. King Kuma. Keith. Janite Pike. Clock. K-Noe. Cone 2020. Crated. Crazy Dark Chocolate. Ice. Kyle. Not that kind. KZ Excellent. Lady Weed. Laundry Mom. Lego Sid. Lethal Nibbles. Linkle. Little Big Trouble. Loathsome Dung Eater. Low Fat Moger. Lucas Boy. Blood Mac James. Lunati. Magic Meows. Mama Rollin. Manapool. Manic Pixie Space Pirate. Now Fever. Mara Ganger. Marcules. Marcus Rambles. Maxwell B. Maximum Dog. Meaty Smash. Maple Puppet. Mega Boy E Nasty. Metal Gear Gaseous. Michelle Citrano. Mike DeVR. Mikusagi. Moa. Bobby Dobby. Big Titty Gop. GF Cooley. Monochrome Only. Monochrome Rainbow. Morgana Black. Mori. Sleep,
Modi,
Mr. Pee Pee Poo Poo Caca,
Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoink Bomb,
Nyrenew,
Nito Torpedo,
Neon Dwarf,
Nifty Rex,
Not
Nobel,
Nuggy,
Okami,
Old Burgle,
Old Man Cranberry,
Ollie,
Omni Nerd Zero,
Only LK,
The Plant,
Oscar,
Paperlandy, PBK,
Pandemic Cowboy,
Pelagic
Undulation,
PK Gaming,
E-Mike,
Popular Hitman, Prismatic Dan,
Pringle Prongle, Pringle Prongle, probably not Grady,
Project Darklight,
Punch Fighter Champion,
Ponosaurus Rex, Quasar McDougal, Quillworth,
Raging Ataraxia,
Real Beans, Reggie Rodriguez,
Renteca Bond,
Ringed Relay,
Rowlett's Bowtie,
Roylondo,
RP Gamer,
Ryan Machel,
Saigon Man,
Salsa, Salty Smasher,
Gabrius,
Scribe Slendy, Sakai no Horda,
Sensual Coder,
Saphirium, Sexy Bionicle GF,
Josh,
Nintendo,
Shut Up Wesley,
Silver Bear 909,
Sin,
God!
Sir Doodles Alive, seriously tired of waiting in line,
Sir Newton,
Sir Slurpsalot, Skyward Lead,
Sleepy Wabbit,
Snart,
Small Turtle House,
Sozetta Dad,
Sock'em Bopper,
Suckdolager,
Space Lizard,
Spider Dad,
Squidget, Squishword,
Star Night Sky,
Streffin Battles,
Super Dingus,
Super Sandwich Guy,
Teotoxin,
Shorn Chubbington,
Terrence Swift,
The Big Bubby,
the Clown Prince of
The
Cringe,
Good Lord has blessed me, hallelujah!
the Green Loki, the Crispy Boy,
The Peacemaker Pyro,
the Salt
the
Knight,
Nomad,
the Real McCoy,
the
Toasted One,
Big Dick Mystic,
Thresh,
Drips Heart,
Tiggles McGuffin,
Tim Lobster, Timid the Writer,
Tony Jones, the Legend,
Total Play, Travis Edwards,
Twiddle
Chungus,
Ty Guy 9001, Type A Grapefruit,
Vid, Vacant Plaza,
Valenris,
Venom, Vice Pup,
Video Gore,
Vic,
Joaquin, get right in my bag,
Waposa,
we are so KBash,
Weed Trash,
Waylon,
Where am I? Help!
Whiskey Dono,
Widgie, Winter Solstice,
Wood TV,
Wrenchim, Zanny Tanner,
Shravius,
Yero 12,
Yashichi,
Yay Kundo, Zachary Livesey,
Zachary V,
Zanasso,
Zane the Impure,
Zane the Pure,
Zed Slayer Gamer,
Zero Salazar,
Zenova,
Cyberbunk.
If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.